Good morning, gamers. And today, for the third time now, we're going to talk about gnomes. I think I've gotten to the bottom of our audio problem, and you might say there are gremlins in our audio problem, like the gremlins just couldn't wait in line for their turn at a video. But the gremlins are not in Old School Essentials Advanced Book, and we're going in order. So, yeah, gremlins will get their own video in this series. But today we're talking about gnomes, third time in a row. I think we've got the audio problem solved now. So we're going to talk about 5 kinds of gnomes. 2 of the kinds of gnomes are going to get their own videos in this series too. But this video is about the gnome in general. So, when gnomes first came to us in our favorite game, they were generally divided into rock gnomes and forest gnomes. There were gnomes that were more closely related to dwarves. The cousins of dwarves lived underground, stuff like that. And then there were gnomes that were more related to fae and the forest and things like that, the more outdoorsy kind of nature. And so there's a lot of diversity when it comes to gnomes and imagining them and what they're like in the worlds of our favorite game. So for a while, life was good. There was the rock gnome, the forest gnome, and then a little later on, they had Underdark versions of the elves. They had the drow. They had Underdark versions of the dwarves, the dwergar. So why not some Underdark versions of the gnomes? And so the deep gnomes, or the Svirfneblin, came along, and they get their own video later on. But one thing about the Svirfneblin is whereas the drow are evil Underdark versions of elves, and the Dwergar are evil Underdark versions of dwarves, the deep gnomes, the Svirfneblin, were still good guys. I noticed that as a kid. I thought, well, okay, that's shaking it up a little bit. It's not just the standard, opposites, yin-yang dichotomy thing. And like I said, the Svirfneblin are going to get their own video. Then about the time that Dragonlance started coming out, in the 80s, people started writing about tinker gnomes. Gnomes that were, clockwork inventors or steampunk. We didn't even have the word steampunk in the 80s, but it certainly would have been used if we'd have had it. Then, of course, in Mystara, which is the main world for the LOFT project, in Mystara we've got sky gnomes, and sky gnomes, get their own video soon in this series. But the sky gnomes they're still tinkery steampunk type gnomes, but sky gnomes have a thing for aviation. And in Mystara, there is actually a gnome city that has been hidden on top of a cloud. And it's hard to see unless you're at the right angle. And sometimes those gnomes, if they want to sneak across the, say Galantrian airspace, they crank up that cloud generator and kind of disguise so you can't see it at all. It just looks like a cloud if they just want to, sneak over there. But generally, the sky gnomes with their flying city avoid Galantrian airspace if possible. They are convinced, and probably rightly so, that the Galantrian mages would try to crash their city and take control of it for magical study or something. Galantrian mages. Anyway, so sky gnomes get their own thing. They are tinkerish gnomes obsessed with aviation. So no, sky gnomes are not something doofy like gnomes with wings or anything like that. So your gnomes they're a thing. And, recently in Vox Machina, Critical Role, stuff like that, there's a gnome bard in Vox Machina. There's a gnome cleric in Vox Machina. So, gnomes are a thing. Gnomes as a character class, if you want to take a regular character class as a gnome, that's great. You could be a gnome fighter. You could be a gnome cleric, like from Vox Machina. You could be a gnome bard, like from Vox Machina. Or if you just play a gnomes tend to be fighter illusionists. And illusionists also have a video coming up in this series pretty soon. We got plenty of videos coming up left in this series. Tomorrow we're going to get to the half-elf. So tomorrow we'll get into that controversy, that started a couple months ago about whether it's racist to have half-elves in your game or whatnot. So that's kind of gnomes in a nutshell. There's a big diversity of gnomes. And of course, not everybody's fantasy is the same. So some people think, gnomes should be either close to the earth or close to nature and forests and stuff. And the idea of steampunk gnomes is kind of I don't know if that's my idea of fantasy. There's other people that love the steampunk gnomes, and they were played for comedy relief in Dragonlance. They were very popular. So I think that the worlds of our favorite game are big enough to have all these kinds of gnomes. So, for example, there is a player in our Saturday night game who has a gnome. Now, he's not a steampunk or inventor clockwork type gnome. But in order to get him suddenly into the group, because they're adventuring in a very remote and hard to access area that most people in Mystara don't even know that area exists, and might not believe it if you told them. And so that particular gnome, we just kind of decided he got airdropped in because there was a crazy sky gnome uncle in the family. So, you might be a family of forest gnomes, but maybe cousin Millie, married a tinker gnome or something. Or, oh yeah, your sister only comes for holidays now because she married a rock gnome and now she lives underground. So, the gnomes have definitely diversified in the world of our favorite game. And so, there isn't just one stereotype of gnome. Different gnomish clans have gotten completely different. So, whatever you'd like to play, gnome or not, come play with us. There are links down in the doodly-doo below. We are almost to our goal of being ready by the end of May to have a capacity to serve 100 gamers. And then by the end of August, of course, we're going for 1,000 gamers. We have a second DM now who will make his public debut on June 24th. At the GEA June 2023 Game Day in St. Clair, Missouri. So that is a one-day mini monthly convention that we have here in the southeast of Missouri. It is not to be missed. It is cool. And I will be unveiling soon several virtual ways that you can attend, even if you can't physically make it to St. Clair, Missouri on June 24th. So, and speaking of conventions, we are going to Gen Con in August. More details about that coming up soon also. So come play with us, say hi, links in the doodly-doo below to everything from Discord to talk to us, to our social media, to this YouTube channel, to, which you already found because you're already here, GM Academy, which is our online game mastering school. Yeah, in the meantime, I will see you around the gaming table.